Hi, I'm Craig Maginness, and I'm here with Chris Smit on the Culture Matters podcast.
I'm impressed, Craig. Just from this moment on, I'm already impressed. You're the one of very, very few people that actually pronounce my last name right. It is SMIT. That is what it is. And for you guys, usually it's followed with an H, so it becomes Smith. But you actually did it 100% correct. Thank you.
Well, as we talked about before we started recording, I sympathize. I have a name that gets grossly mispronounced all the time.
Yeah. Yes, I lived 15 years in Belgium, and so my last name is very Dutch. It's very common. It's like John in English-speaking countries, and in Belgium it's not a common name, so they always had to add an H because that's what they think. No, that's the problem when people start thinking.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's do this. We talked a little bit. I read a little bit about you in your bio, but the audience has no idea who you are. So tell us a bit about yourself. Where do you come from? Where are you now? And a little bit about your so-called cultural frame of reference.
Okay. Well, in terms of professional background, or I guess why I'm here, I spent over 30 years doing international business in one form or another. I spent a good chunk of my career at a Fortune 1000 company where I was responsible for international operations, international sales and marketing, et cetera. I've had my own consultancy based mostly around new market development with a particular focus on international over the last 19 years. Mm-hmm. I'm the immediate past president and former chair and current board member of the World Trade Center Association in Denver, where I also do a lot of real world practical international business training for businesses of all sizes. I've taught international business at several universities, including courses specifically directed to cultural understanding and navigating culture from a business perspective. Mm-hmm. More recently, actually, I have been enjoying more focused on teaching non-traditional business audiences, principally from marginalized communities, mm-hmm. Startup and entrepreneurship skills. I teach a course I've designed for immigrants and refugees, helping them start businesses. I'm on the board of a Black women's nonprofit where I also do entrepreneurship training, empowering, providing economic empowerment for women of color. And then a group that's not so much marginalized, but certainly is non-traditional, is I teach business at a Chinese medical university, teaching acupuncturists and Chinese medical practitioners how to start and run practices. And I'm the author of a book, which I think is how we found each other, called Go Global, which is about international market development. And I have a particular sort of perspective on culture. So in terms of my cultural perspective, in terms of my immediate life, I was born outside of New York City here in the United States, but I've lived in Colorado for over 40 years. I've done business in one form or another, running operations, doing sales, distribution, setting up other arrangements in over 40 countries on 6 continents. When my kids were little,
with this.
You're good. When my kids were little, my one daughter used to tell people her dad worked at the airport. I'm not sure that was a good thing, but the reality was every Sunday or Monday I'd head to the airport and get home the next weekend and spend a week in Europe, a week in Asia, a week in Latin America, and then home. Anyway, so I guess the other thing I'd say about that is I've done enough traveling, and actually more than the travel, been present in enough places that there are a number of places in the world where I know people well enough. I've had the privilege of being invited to their home to have dinner with them and their family and even spend time at their home.
That's nice. Yeah.
And so I've been exposed to, and I think I have a pretty broad range of cultural perspectives, and I appreciate and value all of them.
And you're also a master chef at a Michelin 5-star restaurant or something.
I'm not a master chef, but I am a pianist. I played piano for 50 some
Okay.
years. I played in the I used to play in bars and restaurants, and I play every day by myself, but I still occasionally sit in on a gig somewhere.
Okay. Well, that's
Actually, and I have, if we get to it, I have an interesting international business culture story around playing the piano.
okay. All right. We'll keep that.
So
Let's.
anyway,
I'm crossing my fingers not to forget. That's we could fill a podcast, I think, with your career or with your CV and everything you've done. Um, I don't prepare that much for a podcast. That's not because I'm lazy per se, although could be, but I'm not. And it's more like I prefer to go with the flow and listen to what you say and then sort of go on with that. You mentioned the word
yeah.
go global. You wrote a book, Go Global. It's a term that maybe a lot of people know, or maybe not. So, in your words, what does it mean? In your words, what does go global mean, and maybe how do you do this?
Well, obviously, global is a combination of global and local.
Mm-hmm.
The focus of the book is international market development strategy. So it's for specifically meant to be a practical guide, not a business tome, but something an actual business person would enjoy reading
Mm-hmm.
about how to effectively take a business to new international markets. I've done a bit of that, and my experience is that you can't do that effectively unless you understand a lot of things about the cultural perspective of the market you're going to. And one thing I'd say about it, a lot of times when business people they do think about cultural. Hopefully, they think about cultural acumen, but a lot of times it's around the level of I'm going to actually build relationships. I'm going to negotiate a deal. I need to understand sort of the cultural context. But for me, it starts way sooner than that
Mm-hmm.
because one of my biggest beliefs about business success generally is that the thing that creates value for our customers is not the generic product category of the thing we sell. It's the story we tell, right? That's what effective marketing and branding is, right? It creates a story that communicates a worldview. And what we're trying to do is connect with our natural customers. That is not just anyone with a credit card, not just anybody who might buy take your pick of product category, but the people who tell themselves the same story we tell so that when they do business with us, with them in a positive way because it reflects their own worldview and their own self-view.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's critical with how you find your customers, how you connect with customers. And so all the way back when a company is thinking about going to another market, obviously one of the first things you want to know is there a market there? And a lot of people do it on a very statistical basis. How many people are there? What's the GDP? What's the GDP per capita?
Yeah.
What's the market for my general product category now? And I think it's much bigger than that. And that what you really want to know is, are there people there who tell themselves my story will resonate with? And of course, stories are cultural.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not foreordained that the branding and marketing story, the thing you do that actually creates value in your current market, is going to translate to a new market. And so you really ought to figure that out. And one thing I took a bit is, large companies, capital, big companies, they can afford to go make mistakes. They can get into a market and find out that they totally blew it and write off $100 million and it was a learning experience. But I work with a lot of small and medium-sized businesses doing this, and you can't afford to get it wrong
Right.
that many times. I mean, you'll crater your domestic business. So the key is the other thing is large companies can do a lot of product. I can customize my product for a new market.
Yeah.
But a lot of small companies, I got the product I got. And what I'm looking
Mm-hmm.
for is where can I be successful? And that's the key. When I'm picking places, I need to go to places where I can replicate what it is I successful now in my home market. And a
Mm.
big key to that is going to places where my value proposition, where the story I tell resonates. And I think
Are you
that's
talking
tied
about
up with a
physically going then?
cultural phenomenon.
Are you sorry? Are you talking about physically going there to a location which you think might be interested in whatever you do or want to sell?
Well, Neka, what I was talking about initially is just, if I want to go to a market in the sense that I want to take my product to a market. Having said that, yes, I mean, in the sense that I don't know how you can really get a handle around what you need to do and the complexity of what you need to do unless you go there.
Yeah. No, I fully agree. It
Yeah.
just there's I mean, we had this whole pandemic thing with Zoom and Teams and Skype and what have you.
Yeah.
And now, of course, we couldn't travel or we were not allowed to travel. Um, and that's slowly picking up. And there were definitely some people that say, well, we don't need to physically be together in the same room and press the flesh, as they say. But I think it's a big difference.
I agree. And so I'll tell you another thing, too, that I firmly believe about this that's important when you get to getting on the ground with people is, my first career, which I didn't mention my CV, I was actually a trial lawyer as a
Mm-hmm.
partner at a big law firm and whatnot. So I'm sensitive to legal issues and contracts and all that kind of stuff. But having spent most of my career as an international business person, um, having a contract didn't allow me to sleep at night.
Mm.
What allowed me to sleep at night was knowing that I had a relationship with someone I could trust and who trusted me. And if something went wrong, and let's face it, stuff goes wrong all the time,
Yeah.
um, we could get together and talk about it and reach some kind of mutual understanding. I mean, I could get you on the phone, and that's hard to do unless you have a real relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's hard to have a real relationship with someone unless you've been with them and sat and broken bread with them, to use a bit of a cliche. But
Yeah, no, but it's
you know
that fundamental. I definitely
yeah,
agree. Yeah, it's true.
yeah.
It's there's a lot of stuff loose in the air that I'd like to see if we can tie that together. You have evidently a lot of international experience. You talk and teach and educate people on from different cultures, even in your own country, but also you've done so in other countries. What is from your perspective, because your perspective is different from my perspective. I mean, you're an American, I'm a Dutchman. As the Chinese proverb says, if you and I look at the river, we both see a different river because our frame of reference is
Right,
different, right?
right.
So from your perspective and maybe your experience as well, what are the most common issues or problems that you have been facing in your intercultural work? Take the refugees, take the minority groups, take the, I don't know, the whatever. Give me some examples.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think the biggest challenges people face and need to get over are the cultural differences that are below the surface. Um, there's a great picture I've seen, and I stole it from somebody actually and use it periodically, called the cultural iceberg,
Mm-hmm.
where the part above the water are all the things you generally think of as culture, right? It's food, it's music, it's the way people dress, it's that kind of thing,
Yeah.
which at the end of the day is pretty superficial in terms of really understanding where people are coming from. And so when you get below that surface and try and get to a deeper level where you can develop good relationships and really understand people, how to communicate with people, how to meet people where they are.
Mm-hmm.
I think the big issues, one is it a contextual, relational, or a direct sort of culture in terms of communication style? And in this sense, actually, I'm not sure you and I are that different. I think most Northern Europeans, people in Canada, people in the United States, tend to come from a relatively direct culture in terms of, we both know where we're trying to get here.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it's nice to exchange pleasantries, and that varies a little bit on the surface. But at the end of the day, let's get to the point,
Right.
right?
No, true.
But a lot of cultures are very contextual. They're very relational. You can't even, I mean, in their sense, even have a conversation about where you want to go until you have a relationship
Yeah.
that you can place that conversation in the context of, right? And that obviously takes time. And that's a, very different thing in Asia. It's a different thing in Africa. It's a different thing in Latin America, which is another reason why you have to actually go there and meet people. We think, oh, well, you do it on Zoom. I mean, all we have to do is talk, right? Because that's all that matters. And for a lot of people, and it becomes a huge frustration, obviously. It's why I think a lot of Western business people feel frustrated going to play, like nothing ever gets done. Everything takes a long time. Every time I think we're almost there, we're not there. And it's because I'm thinking, well, I can see where we're going. Let's just get there.
Yeah.
And they're thinking, I don't know you well enough yet to get there. So that's number one. I think another huge barrier, honestly, is the cultural perception of time. And in a couple different contexts. One is just sort of linear time versus relational time, right? Again, in the West, we tend to operate on calendars, and if we have a meeting for 4 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon, it's going to start at 4 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. And we're both going to be there, and we're both going to be ready to go, and we're going to expect an agenda. In a lot of places, it's about being where I am now. And so this happened to me. I've gone down to meet people in Mexico. I've had a meeting at 10 a.m. on a Wednesday, and I get to the person's office, and they're not there. And they're out, and honestly, their assistant's not entirely sure when they're coming back. Yeah. Maybe later, maybe tomorrow. Now, I could take that personally as, wow, I'm so insignificant, they can't even be on my calendar. But the reality is they are somewhere else with someone else. And the importance of their now is who they are with now. And when they get to me, they'll be with me in the same way. Yeah. But you need to get that. And that's certainly true in not just across country cultures, but that is a difference one perceives in cultural distinctions, for example, between the African-American community in the United States, or a lot of the immigrants I work with come from different perspectives. Yes. Another time dimension that's very different is the sense of short-term, long-term. And what does that mean? Again, we tend to be pretty much like a long-term is, a year, like a couple quarters.
That's really long.
Maybe I do long-term strategic planning, and I'm like 3 years out, and I know that anything I think about after 3 years is going to be nonsense anyway, because the world's going to change. But you work with people in Japan, I mean, long-term is 50 years from now. They're thinking, they're planning. And, that creates a huge frustration for, again, Western business people, American business people, in my case, if you don't get that, because what you tend to perceive is they're always dragging their feet, and they always want to have one more meeting, and they always want to raise one more thing that doesn't seem that relevant to me, because I just want to know that I can start making sales next quarter. Yeah. And they're thinking about, but how is this going to be positioned in terms of where we're be and where we're developing and what we're going to become and what we're going to grow into, 20 years from now. Yeah. And so it creates a really different framework. And then the third one, and I'll leave this, I think other big one that happens is what constitutes truth. That's actually a very cultural thing. Again, in the West, those of us who are in countries that were part of the Western Enlightenment, truth is kind of an objective thing, right? It's scientific fact. It's either true or it's not, and you can test it. And in many countries, truth is relational. I mean, what's important, what's true, is your and my happiness, your and my ability to be together and to get along and to be in the same boat together. And if that requires some shading of the factual truth, telling you something that we both know is a bunch of BS, but it would make us feel better, that's okay. And then in some parts of the world, if you do business in the Islamic world, in the Middle East, there's an aspect of truth that's religious. And you need to understand that perspective when you're talking about things and evaluating things. And again, it creates friction, because people from our cultural perspective go to do business in these places and like, wow, this guy is, he's lying to me, he's not being truthful, he's, and that's not what's happening at all. I mean, honestly, if they tell you the naked truth to your face, they probably don't like you or care about you very much, because they're willing to sacrifice what they perceive to be building the relationship. You may have experienced this if you've done much business in Asia, but a big thing in Chinese culture, for example, is they won't say no. to your face in so many words. I mean, they say no all the time in all kinds of ways.
Yeah.
But it's rude, it's impolite to just say no to somebody, right? So, you're waiting for a shipment, you're trying to figure out, is it going to happen, and we are on time, and you're feeling a little stressed out about, maybe it's not. They're saying, well, we're intent on making you a happy customer. I mean, that's our focus. And you're thinking, okay, well, they want to make me happy, it must be on time. And then when it doesn't happen on time, you're like, what the hell was that about? Why didn't you tell me it wasn't on time? And they're like, I did tell you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you're so dumb, you don't understand it.
It's indirect and direct communication. I had a talk some time back with somebody from India, and we talked exactly what you just mentioned in terms of you can't say no. So I said, but what if it is a no? What what is the alternative to no? And the answer was yes. So the alternative to no, if you can't say no, then the yes is the answer. So
well, actually, what I found out, it's a little finer cut than that. I think, in my experience, is what it actually is what you look for is relationship affirming things that aren't no, they're not a direct answer, but they're not really yes either. So you go through a whole conversation. I say you place an order with a new supplier and you're concerned because I really need it in 60 days, and is it going to happen? And you're feeling pretty good at first, and then you don't get communication, you're wondering what's going on. And you call, they'll say something like well, we're doing everything to make it happen, but that would require adding many more people. And you're like, okay, and are you going to do that? And they'll be like, well, we want you to be happy. Now, he didn't say I'm going to do it, but they would like you to be happy. They're not going to add more people because that would be crazy. And so therefore your order's not going to get done on time. And if you're smart enough to understand what the guy just told you, you know that. But obviously you're just focused on tell me yes or no. Oh, okay. He said, they're going to do it. Right. And then like, it's not happening, and you call them again and you want to know what's going on, as I say, and they focus on, as I say, relational affirmation, affirming statements that are meant to let you know that we value this relationship, and this relationship's going to last, and this relationship is going to last past this next order that goes down the tubes because it doesn't get done on time. And this gets back to the time thing, right? Like, why are you in such a hurry? Why is your hair always on fire about this stuff? Right? Life goes on.
Yeah.
We're all going to get up tomorrow, and we're all going to have a meal, and it's all going to be just fine. So, it's a kind of thing, obviously it drives Western people absolutely nuts. But if you let it drive you nuts because you don't understand what's going on, it's going to be hard to develop the kind of relationship you need to have to ultimately make it work over the long run. Right.
Evidently. Yeah, true. No, you're right. It's what is the saying again? You guys have a clock, but we've got time. Something like that. It's
there you go. It's a good expression. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's something like that. I'm looking at the clock here as well, and the time that we've left in this recording is one thing triggered me is global business dynamics. You wrote trends and forecasts for the future. Where are we heading? I mean, I get the question quite often. Are we going to be, will cultural differences be a thing of the past in 50 years' time? I personally don't think so, but give me a direction. What is your opinion on this?
Well, on that specific question, no, I don't think cultural differences are going to disappear. If anything, it seems like the more recent trend is cultural differences expanding and becoming more important even within sort of, your country, my country, whatever, in terms of how we view and value different cultural contributions. But I guess the other thing, in a broader sense, when I think about trends in the future, I always think of, like, there are a couple different realities going on out there, a couple different tracks, right? One is what I think of as sort of the government political reality. I work
Mhm.
with a lot of people who do trade policy in one way or another, right? And they have a view of what's going on in markets and how people connect and who doesn't like who these days, and
Mhm.
who you can do business with and who you can't do business with. And then there's sort of a whole nother parallel universe of business people, people in the private sector, who are really just trying to make mutually beneficial exchanges
Mhm.
and solve problems and make some money to make all our lives a little better. And I think the appreciationship and relationships and sort of how cultural differences are viewed, good, bad, and different, is different in my experience between those two sets of people.
Mhm.
I don't know how many places I've been where pretty much everyone I talk to in the private sector as a business person about what we're doing all believe that the government in their country is screwed up and doesn't get it.
Yeah, that's true.
And
That's
it
pretty
and
much
it's
true.
and it's really kind of in the way and part of the problem, right?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, of course, everyone I deal with in the public sector and government policy, that's it. That's the world. Like if they don't, make this work or do whatever they have to do, the world is going to come to an end,
Yeah.
because it's just so important. Anyway, and then I think there's also a different universe, honestly, between big corporations and small businesses. Right, because big corporations, Apple, Amazon, they operate in a world when they go around the world,
Mhm.
that is culturally different. And it's even culturally different in terms of what I was talking about, kind of what your product is, what your value proposition is, right? I mean, if you're Apple, I mean, people want an iPhone. I don't want the Chinese iPhone. I want the iPhone, right? That's sort of the whole point.
Yeah.
But if you're a small business that has zero cultural visibility, relevance, um, really need to be sensitive to what is my brand, what's my story here.
Yeah.
And I may even want to change my brand identity in another place because the thing I use, it was very clever when I, thought it up in
Mhm.
Cleveland, Ohio. But now that I'm trying to use it in some faraway place, they're like, I don't get it.
Yeah.
You know.
We have we have 3 minutes left, Craig. So I'm going to ask you to if you have to give us a couple of tips to become more culturally competent.
Um, well, obviously, number one is to appreciate that there are, in fact, some fundamental differences, to think about these things that are underneath the surface and the bottom of the iceberg. And what are those? And so when you're thinking about going someplace, you're thinking about a culture. The food is great. Music is lovely. I love music everywhere, all that kind of stuff. But think about what are the deeper things and educate yourself about that, right?
Uh-huh.
One of the specific tips I tell people is go to a trade show. And by that, I mean, most people think of trade shows as something you do after you're in a market to go sell something. But for me, it's something you should do like when you're even thinking about a market, because pretty much every industry, if you think about it, has a major trade show in all different parts of the world, in Asia, in Europe, in North America, Latin America. And they condense like an entire industry into a couple
Mhm.
in a convention center where you can see who are the suppliers, who are the actors, who are the players, how do they interact with each other, what's the where are we in terms of cutting edge technology, how do people talk about things, how do people accept things, anyway. So that's a kind of very concrete
Okay.
way to get on the ground in a space. If you don't know, well, where am I going to even begin?
Yeah.
That's a great place to start.
What's
And
your other one? What would be your last one? Your last tip?
I have to have three. This is a you need three
No, no,
things.
this is fine. No, no, this is if this is
I
good
think
enough.
honestly, number three to me is have fun. I mean, I think it is just fascinatingly fun to meet people from different cultures and to
Hmm.
learn where they're coming from and why they do what they do and why they think what they think. I mean, I think that's fascinating of anybody.
Yeah.
But it's a unique experience. So, have fun. And I mean, if you're trying to do international business or going and you're not having fun, I don't know, find another career, stay home, you know. So
Greg, if people want to
that's
get
my
in
other
touch with
that's
you,
my
how
other
could they
tip.
do that? I said, if people want to get in
Uh,
touch with you, how can they do that?
well, the easiest, there is a website for my book that has a contact page on it. I generally don't give out my personal email in public settings, though
Fine.
once someone gets to know me, that's the best way to get a hold of me.
Okay.
Honestly, if you Google me, I have a disturbingly large presence in a Google search. I'm
Okay.
a little worried about that. But if LinkedIn, direct message me or message me on LinkedIn is a great way to get a hold of me.
Good. All right. Thank you, Greg. I'm gonna thank you again for coming on this show, the Culture Matters podcast, and I'm pretty sure we'll bump into each other in the future. Thank you.
Good. I enjoyed it, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you.